Welcome to the Brain Health Hookup. I'm Laurel Myers-Hurst, your resident groovologist, and I believe that better mental health needs to be fun. Here we talk about mental wellness, we explore the physical, emotional, and relational needs we have as humans with the science and practices that help our mental health to flourish. Plus, we dive into my signature method, groove therapy, that engages folks in groove-based music making to lift mood and lower inflammation and pain. I'm so glad you're here. So let's hit it.
Well.
Well, now that's a deep subject.
Thank you so much for being with me, Patti, on the Brain Health Hookup. I've been looking forward to having you as a guest since we met more than a year ago because of our mutual interest in how the brain can grow and change so people can be healthy, healthier than they might have even imagined just by taking advantage of their body's innate neuroplasticity. And my audience knows that word because I use it in nearly every episode of the Brain Health Hookup. But I'm going to invite you to answer a few questions in a moment, but I want to read from my new release book, Groove Therapy, the beginning of chapter 3 on insight. Mental health problems are pernicious. They steal away purpose and meaning in life until paralysis sets in. We can see life moving by us, but we're out of sync with it. The energy required to jump back into life in progress is akin to jumping on a moving merry-go-round. Feelings of defeat overwhelm all desire to try. We just can't muster the energy, and we're pessimistic about whether the effort would do any good anyway. Approaching mental wellness through participation in groove-based music making puts a handle or maybe a hook on a world that seems to be spinning at an impossibly relentless rate. That hook is insight, the aha moment that sparks our curiosity while emboldening and energizing us to engage. And when I think of one of my first aha moments that I remember from my childhood was the day I got my first glasses. And because that was the way that my family chose to treat my vision problems, I remember realizing that trees had leaves, that
Absolutely.
that roads had lines and things like that. So I just want to hear from your perspective how seeing better opens new realms of possibility. You're a specialist in both education and vision improvement. So just tell us more about your background and what you see vision, the place it plays in people's well-being.
Well, first of all, I couldn't agree more with your quote there to your book, which is a fantastic book. So I encourage all your listeners to get a copy ASAP and read that. But yes, certainly. So the way we see the world has a lot to do with our visual system. So my background started out as a special education teacher. I had a focus actually with adapted physical education, so movement. And then I was going to do my doctorate work in special education, but I decided to get married and get my occupational therapy degree. So I did that. So I have an occupational therapy degree along with my pedagogy degree. And then I decided to get my certification as an optometric vision therapist. So I've kind of put all that together and then sought more certifications in auditory processing, in primitive reflex integration, neurofeedback. And now I'm really pursuing gut health because that is also, you talked about our insides. So how we see has a lot to do with our gut health as well. So yeah, so it's a great subject. I'm so glad you're bringing it to the forefront today.
So when it comes to communicating with the outside world, our perceptions, how we actually see, changes our communication and relationships. How does the work that you do influence those visual systems? How do you go about it?
Well, so we generally at our office will start off with seeing one of our neurooptometrists. So we want a really good, high quality sensory motor neurovision evaluation. And we see if there's something just with the acuity as one skill. So how well you see clearly, which was in your case, something very important to you. That's just one skill. But as you talk about already, like mental health, we have a lot of vision skills. And so we will tap into exploring a lot of different visual skills, depth perception. So depth perception, for example, is partly how you feel vibration through your skin, how you hear sounds, and how you see space. So it's all of that put together. So I know you love drumming. I brought my drum in the background because the vibration and the drumming, it's so important to getting actually eyesight depth because our eyes and ears have to work together. So we'll do evaluations with the visual system and go beyond what your general optometrist or ophthalmologist would do. We really look at how you function, how you live behind the eyes. And then we might explore further testing. Sometimes they'll say, well, maybe you have some primitive reflexes retained. And so maybe that's interfering with the development of the visual system and the auditory and the whole mental health piece. So we'll maybe do some primitive reflex evaluations, and then we might do some visual perceptual evaluations. And I might actually send my clients off to get like a gut health test as well. So we do all of that testing, only what's needed for the person, only based on their challenges that they face on a daily basis.
You use the expression, how do you live behind the eyes? Tell me more what that means to you and your team.
Right. So when you were a little girl and you saw the green of the trees, the blobs of the trees, you were actually kind of reserved, right? You were living behind those eyes. You were inside yourself. Once you got your acuity corrected and you could see clearly, I bet you wanted to reach out and touch those leaves, right? You wanted to reach out into the world. And so how our visual system is processing information, it affects how we live behind the eyes, but also how we engage in our world. And vision is one of our few senses that actually we get information going out in the world, but information comes back to us through our same sense. So it's kind of a neat thing, but it really does help with social engagement.
Social engagement is in itself a skill. I'm wondering when someone has vision-related difficulties, and you're talking about more than just being able to see clearly, but being able to understand what those images we're clearly seeing mean and the various parts of the brain that are involved. Tell me about how that might change our willingness to, like you said, reach out into the world.
Right. Well, if you have fear because you don't know what something is, or another one of the skills is speed of processing visual information. So a child in a classroom, for example, might look out in the distance at the whiteboard, chalkboard, or now they have these fancy electronic boards, right? And then back at their desk, right? How well they can quickly look up and point their eyes in the right direction at the right place in space. So they might actually point their eyes behind the board, which means if you put your eyes behind the object you're looking at, it'll actually split into two. So then you get this diplopic image, and then your brain has to work on clearing it up. And then, or I might want to look at you, but my eyes accidentally go to the left or the right. So I might not have good eye movement mechanics. So these are some of the different things that we could explore, but how we take our vision and how we use it will affect how we feel confident about ourselves. So if I'm lagging behind because I have poor eye movements, I move my eyes slightly off the teacher, for example, off target. And then I figure out, well, wait a minute, I'm a little confused now because I can't process the information. So now I'm feeling kind of bad about myself. I might actually have slow processing with my auditory system. So my visual system and my auditory system are sending signals, but they're missing each other. They're not connecting. So we want to have the auditory and the visual system connect the information simultaneously and synergistically so that I can have comprehension, so that I can feel good, I can feel safe. And then I'm more willing to engage in conversation with the teacher because I am right on it. Or if I have poor eye movements or if I have poor speed of processing, I actually might be a little delayed, a little behind the eight ball, a little behind the conversation. Teachers going on, students in the classroom are already moving on to another direction. Let's say it's an adult and you're at, lunch with your best friends or whatever, and they've been your best friends for years, but you have maybe had a brain injury or some other thing, they're talking about a subject, but you're still back 3 sentences ago. And you just feel like, I'm a little lost in this conversation. I'm not sure if I'm making sense to my friends. I'm starting to feel bad about myself. I think I'll just reserve. I'll just be a listener, right? And so we start withdrawing, and not engaging. So these are some ways that our visual system can affect our emotional health, our emotional well-being, and just even loving ourselves, right? Because we can sometimes start feeling bad about our own self.
And listening to you, it's hard to remember you're talking about vision instead of hearing, right? Because they're so closely paired when they're healthy. So some of the things you mentioned definitely remind me of patients who are coming to me seeking help with what they suspect is attention deficit disorder. Can you tell me in really simple terms why it's so important for an assessment like what you provide to be done before an ADHD diagnosis, and especially medication for ADHD?
Oh, I'm so glad you brought that up. So a typical person with attention issues, it's like, are you listening? Are you paying attention? Are you focused on me, right? Where does that come from? Where do we focus? We focus on our eyes, right? That's where we focus. So our eyes are actually made of brain tissue. The back of the eye has the optic nerve. And if we cannot actually focus our eyes, or that's acuity, right? If we cannot focus it, it's very difficult to focus our mind. We have to be able to focus our eyes. It's the way we focus our mind. So simple terms, highly related. And then again, how do we learn to focus our eyes? Well, we actually start off with primitive reflexes. So if we have attention issues, I would say we definitely need to get an eye exam. Let's look at the functional vision skills. So we want to go to somebody that's going to do a neurological functional exam with the visual system, not a simple general eye exam. We need to go further. We need to do more of a sensory motor eye exam. But then we need to pick up if there is some underlying issues, like with primitive reflex retention, that it slowed down the focusing process of the eyes just in early childhood. And then that stayed with them even through adulthood. So we can have adults with attention deficit disorder who either had a developmental delay of their visual system and the regular optometrist never found that, or maybe they've had a head injury or something like that throughout life, or even just aging, natural aging, right? Even aging can affect the way we focus our eyes. So, and we know that older adults, as their vision goes or their eyesight goes, they also have like neural fatigue and just, I can't think of things. Where did I replace those objects? Where am I? What time of day is it? And that's all related to visual system.
Wow. So impactful. Knowing that past painful experiences reorganize the brain, I can imagine there would be strong effects of trauma, either single event or chronic or serial trauma, that affect vision and perception. Can you tell me more about what you might do about that?
Oh, you just really hit on a significant point. There's actually a condition called stress syndrome. And this condition actually is highly correlated with teenage girls. And if they have a traumatic event that they cannot process, their visual system actually freezes. And so the optometrist would measure their eyesight, and you've got 20/20 eyesight, like you're perfect, but everything is blurry. I can't process that information. Well, it's trauma based, and it may be just to that person perceived trauma. So family may not even realize that there was a traumatic event, but there is hope. So vision therapy can really affect a person's ability to process traumas. And when we work in collaboration with mental health specialists, it's fantastic. So there's some tools that we use, and I actually brought some tools that we use to help process traumas, although that's not our goal. So I just want to make that clear. As optometric vision therapists, we're working to build visual skills. The part where traumas are released, we might hear some of that, but then we want to make sure that we're connected to a person that's qualified to take care of the mental health part of their healing process. Anyways, we have these flippers. So we'll put them over the eyes like this, and you have to clear. So you're practicing the muscles of clearing of your focusing muscles. Well, if you exercise your focusing muscles, right, you are going through this, what we call flexion and extension pattern. All right. It's sort of like if anybody knows primitive reflexes, it's sort of like a fight or flight primitive reflex more. But we're opening up the window and we're closing. So we're learning how to open and close on a cellular level, right, of the visual system, which gives now a chance for expression and communication to happen. So that's one thing we do is we work with flippers. We might also work with different colored lenses. So this is called syntonics. And you'll see this one is kind of green. We have all different colors. Color has different healing processes. So it's all vibration, kind of like drumming, right? It's vibration, but through light. And so we'll work on those sorts of things. If you went to a person that does vision therapy, they might do those sorts of things. And we'll do a lot of eye movements. So eye movements are really important in connecting that trauma part with the visual system. So even making eye movements, rapid eye movements, left, right, like this, back and forth, can help set our heart rate and our eyes and our breathing all in rhythm. So do you know, even as a fetus, when we're developing our visual systems, we're also developing our psychology. We don't develop our psychology after birth, waiting for traumas to happen. Oh, now we feel good or bad, right? No, we're developing that psychology in utero. And along with that, we're developing our eye movements. So we have found that if we can get the body rhythm, and again, that's back to your work, Laura, which I just love so much, getting rhythm and healing through movement and sound. And we're doing that through the visual system. So just these eye bounces left, right, like this. And then you could visualize whatever your therapist wants you to work on that's meaningful to you, that's healing to you. Like I could visualize just a sunny day, right? Or I like to ski. So I'm going to visualize downhill skiing because that's fun to me, but back and forth and just kind of moving back and forth. Or if I were led by a qualified psychologist or mental health specialist, I could work on changing a trauma. So going from one event and changing it into a more positive way, back and forth, back and forth. But these are all things that we can do through the visual system to help heal our inner self so we can envision a brighter future.
Definitely. Some of the tools that you've shared with us today are available through a network of people who do similar work to your company, which is the Vision Development Team. And I want you to just talk very briefly about the professional association that your offices in Ohio cooperate with.
Yes, we have quite a few. So one of the organizations is the one that certifies us to have a fellowship in the area of practice. So our doctors are fellows of the College of Optometry and Vision Development, COVD. Now, they have actually just recently changed their name. So they are now OVDRA, which brings in the Optometric Development and Rehabilitation Association aspect of all the work we do, because traditionally, most people think of, oh, you just work with pediatrics, but we work with people of all ages. So if somebody wanted to find a physician that could do this type of work, they might want to go to covd.org to find a fellow in the College of Optometry, of Vision Development, or there's another one called the Optometric Extension Program Foundation. That's oepf.org. And you can find a doctor there. So OEPF provides a lot of our education, higher level education. And then there's the International Association of College of Behavioral Optometry. That's ICBO. I've had the pleasure of going to Australia to speak, Canada to speak, and in the US to speak for the International Association. And then there's an association that my husband actually founded. It's called ISFA, the International Sports Vision Association. And we work with athletes too, because there's a lot of mental health and even just mental performance in sport, right? So these are all skills, how we see the world, both physiologically and emotionally. How we see the world has a lot to do with how we perform, whether we're a mom raising a family, dad, at work, or an athlete, a child, or, in the classroom. It doesn't matter. We're all visual performers. We all have to perform at a high level, and our visual system can help us see the world a little bit better.
I 100% agree with what you're saying. That's why we're bringing you to this audience, because not everyone is a pro athlete who can come to you personally. And if they don't know about the type of work that your team does, I have to say in other countries, it may be more accepted or unknown that this type of care is available. But just because we're behind the times in the US doesn't mean that what you're doing isn't so valuable. You are also an author of the book Indicators of Primitive and Postural Reflexes. So that's one of the ways people can get into your world. But if someone was to come to Ohio to see your team in one of your offices, what type of offering would be available to them? How do they get started?
Well, we want to start typically with a vision exam. So they're going to ask to get the high level vision exam that we can really look at how they're functioning. So they want to ask for the higher level vision exam, not a general eye exam. Right. So that's the first thing. We don't require it. Some people do want to do a primitive reflex evaluation with me prior to the eye exam, but it does not make sense to build body coordination and just control over the body if we have a skewed visual system. And so we do need to find out how our visual system is operating. So we do generally ask for the eye exam, and then they'll go on further. Now, in your show notes, there'll be that offering for 10% off of a primitive reflex evaluation with us at our office. So if your listeners would like to take advantage of that, that would be something really cool.
Well, thank you so much, Patti. I was so thrilled to meet you. I think we have felt that both commiseration and collegiality about how much this work needs to be available, because there are no adverse side effects and no downside to this work. It can be a little bit disorganizing to reorganize your visual systems, just like your mental health, right? If someone's working on their mental health and actually approaching the real problem, things can become more clear. We have more insight about the problem, but it's also leading to a true and lasting healthful solution that's in line with how we are made and how we are made to thrive. And I know you believe in that like I do. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. You can tell I have quite a passion for what we do, and I love working together, because it's when we're together that we're successful and we're having a lot of fun. And it is just an amazing thing to see people live a better life. I just couldn't ask for anything better to do with my days.
That segues to my conclusion, which is always remember, together we have everything we need.
That's right. Thank you so much for having me on.
Thank you.
Thank you for tuning into this episode of the Brain Health Hookup. I hope this episode radiates with the conviction that generating mental wellness needs to be fun and safe. We want you to find your power and understand your innate design to flourish in everything you do. And we hope that inspires you to come back and listen for more. I'd love for you to leave a review of this podcast, as it helps this show grow to reach more people who need to make mental wellness fun. You can find the leave a review button, as well as all the YouTube visuals, bonuses, and ways we can help to support you on our website, podcast.grooveforhealth.com. I appreciate you more than words can say. See you next time, and remember, together we have everything we need.